Cowboy, does the bulge between my legs intrigue you? Is that why your eyes won't leave? Tombstone, Arizona, 1881. The air in Tombstone was a suffocating thing, heavy with the dust of greed and the scent of fear. The sun, a white-hot hammer, had bleached the boardwalks and baked the earth until it cracked. This was a town built on men's worst intentions, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret. The heavy silence of the afternoon shattered with a dry, sickening snap, sharp as a bone breaking under a boot. Not gunfire, at least not yet. It was the sound of a fist driving a young woman into the support post of the Blackwood and Sons mercantile. The dull thud rang against sun-baked wood, and dust leapt up in a cloud that clung to the throat like old guilt. The raw smell of sweat, dirt, and fear was already thick in the air of a town built on greed, but in that moment it sharpened until it stung the nose. I was leaning against the hitching rail across the street, brim of my hat shading eyes that had seen too much. My name is Clay Vance, though whispers still call me Iron Hand, a name that once carried weight, now just a curse echoing from my past. I came to Tombstone not seeking trouble, only a quiet corner to let my story end with something like dignity. Instead, I found myself watching a mob decide the fate of a woman who had nothing but her pride left. She stumbled on a loose board, catching herself with difficulty. The crowd fell silent. That silence was its own verdict. Judge, rope, and grave all wrapped into one. She froze where she stood, chest rising quick and sharp, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. Her skin, darker than theirs, drew every ounce of their hatred. Her name was Ayanna, part Apache, part Navajo. She lived in the dry wash outside town, sewing scraps, patching canvas, mending boots for flour enough to last a week. They claimed she had stolen a bridle and saddle. In this place, accusation alone was enough. Sheriff Blackwood pushed forward, spitting into the dust. He wore his badge like a crown and his righteousness like armor, his eyes fixed on Ayanna with practiced malice, promising ruin before she spoke a word. She had no coin, no kin, no friend in this place, yet shame did not touch her. Her jaw set, her silence hardened. She would not beg. I saw what the crowd refused to. Her back was straight though her hands shook. Her eyes met theirs without flinching. A cheap silver bracelet glinted on her wrist, a mark of heritage, not theft. And I saw the false curl of Blackwood's smile, more performance than conviction. He wanted a spectacle. My chest tightened. I had lived 20 years turning my back on my badge, on dead men, on whole towns I had failed. Each time I had walked away, the guilt piled higher. But something about her silence pressed heavier than all of it. My boots rooted in the dirt. I stepped down from the rail. Spurs dragged slow, cutting through the hush. Heads turned. Clay Vance, Iron Hand the killer no one quite trusted but everyone recognized. I stopped in front of Blackwood. My voice was steady. "She's accused of stealing tax, Sheriff. You gonna drag her off to a noose, or let a man of honor settle this debt?" Blackwood sneered. "She's a savage. Doesn't understand property. This is frontier justice, Vance." I slid a hand inside my coat. The crowd tensed, expecting iron, but I drew out a single silver coin, heavy in the palm. My last bit of clean money, saved for a purpose that might matter. I let it fall into the dust at Blackwood's boots. "That pays for the bridle, the saddle, the dust on her dress. Paid in full, Sheriff. Now break this crowd before you choke on your own theater." Murmurs rippled. No one argued. In Tombstone, silver was law. Ayanna stood frozen. Her chest rose and fell, fast, uneven. Her eyes lingered on the coin, then on me. She wanted to ask why, but pride locked her throat. She bent, lifted the tack with trembling arms, and walked away. Her jaw clenched, her back unbending, her silence sharper than any curse she could have spoken. I should have walked away too, safer, cleaner. But I knew the whispers would follow her, stones would fly, maybe worse. That buried code I had tried to drown in whiskey clawed back to the surface. I untied my dun mare and followed her path, not close, but not far. Not as protector, not as suitor, just near enough to step in again if the mob found its courage. Her camp was a lean-to pressed against a red rock wall, canvas patched with care. She struggled with the tack, hands shaking with exhaustion. My chest ached at the sight. She saw me across the way. Her shoulders stiffened, bracing. To her, I might have been just another man come to sneer. I lifted my chin once, nothing more. She read it for what it was, acknowledgement, not intrusion. That alone unsettled her. In this town, no one had ever given her even that. I told myself I'd watch only for the night. But deep down I knew I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Night fell sharp. I lay awake in the livery, thoughts circling back to her. Proud, silent, worn thin. Too many faces from my past joined hers faces of those I had left to fate. Before dawn, I rose. When she stepped from her camp, she froze. I was seated on a stone, steady as ever. "Why are you here, old man?" she asked, voice low, frayed. "Because no one else is," I said. I placed jerky and a canteen on the ground between us. "Eat." She hesitated, pride her last defense. But hunger won. She picked up the food with trembling fingers. "You'll need it," I told her, nodding at her flimsy shelter. "This camp won't stand when they come back." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you care, Iron Hand?" "Because I've seen what happens when no one does." Not pity, just recognition. In the silence, our burdens recognized each other. Later that day, I patched a tear in her roof. Her anger came fast. "They'll think I'm with you. You'll make it worse." "They already judged you," I said. "With or without me, they'll find their reason." She faltered. Deep down, she knew it. Her silence, her bloodline, her very presence, nothing could erase the target. "The camp won't hold against a raid," I said. "I'll reinforce it." "Why? What do you expect in return?" "Nothing. Because it needs doing. Because I know what it's like when no one stands." That night, she watched me from the shadows as I hauled stone and brush, securing her walls. I worked until the light bled away. Each rock laid down felt like payment on an old debt. I told myself it was duty. But the truth ran deeper. For reasons I didn't want to name, I wasn't leaving. I had abandoned too many lost causes. This time, I would stand. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway, to keep more Wild West love stories coming. My choice to stay escalated the conflict immediately, turning my quiet act of decency into a loud declaration of war against the town's prejudice. The rough-hewn structure I had built for Ayanna was not just a shelter, it was a line drawn in the dust of tombstone. The town saw my effort not as honor, but as an immediate threat. In the narrow, dirt-choked heart of the town, the whispers grew teeth. At the Bull's Head Saloon, the men muttered that Ayanna, the Apache girl, had snared the old gunfighter for protection, or perhaps for darker favors. The lie grew wilder with each telling. I was a hired killer lying low. She was hiding my crimes. Truth never mattered here, only the tale that fit the town's ugly mood. Ayanna felt the weight of it when she walked to the main well for water. Women at the pump turned their backs, their skirts swaying in a deliberate show of contempt. One of them whispered just loud enough, "Shameful." Ayanna's face burned, her grip on the bucket handle so tight her knuckles whitened. She wanted to shout that she had asked for none of this, but her throat locked shut. She had learned fast that silence leaves fewer scars than screaming into deaf ears. I saw her from the distance, near the livery. I didn't intervene this time. She needed to walk back on her own, to show them her own resilience. Yet, when she returned, the bucket was already filled at her doorstep, a small, silent gift of respect I'd left before the sun was fully up. My past, like a shadow I couldn't outrun, was about to ride into the present. That afternoon, 2 riders appeared on the edge of town, their coats cleaner than most, their boots polished, their eyes sharp and cruel. They were the kind of men who wore violence like a tailor-made suit. They asked after me by the name tied to a score of bad choices, Clay Iron Hand Vance. "Been looking for you," the taller one, a man named Reese, drawled. "Long way, too. You owe for what happened down by the border." Men don't forget debts. When I stepped into the street to meet them, The town gathered behind shutters and door frames, waiting for the expected spectacle. "What debt?" I asked, my voice low and steady, a deliberate choice not to let the tremor of old fear show. "The kind that can't be paid with coins," Reese replied, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. "The kind you pay standing up or lying down." Ayanna stood in the doorway of her camp, her heart pounding. She was torn. Part of her wanted to demand the full, ugly truth from me, to know what I had done before I ever walked into this town. Another part feared that asking would shatter the fragile trust we had built. I kept my hands loose at my sides. "You've got the wrong man," I lied, a shield. But my eyes flicked toward Ayanna for the briefest moment, and she understood. I wasn't denying the debt for myself. I was protecting her from the full weight of the danger. They spat and rode off, leaving the town's whispers reignited, fiercer now. If there had been doubt before about me, there was none now. I was a man with enemies, and Ayanna was tied to me. That evening, the candle flickered, and I stood by the entrance to her lean-to, my shoulders heavy. "How long before they come back?" Ayanna finally whispered. "Not long enough." I met her eyes. Her breath caught. Yet, even with fear pressing in, she didn't tell me to leave. Instead, she whispered, "Then I guess you'll be needing a structure that holds." It was her way of saying, "Stay." I nodded, the faintest hint of relief breaking through the weary mask of my face. I knew I owed her the full truth, the weight of the honorable failure I carried. Those men. I rode with them once, I admitted a few days later. They robbed payrolls, scared towns, and left bodies behind. I never pulled the trigger myself, but I never stopped them either. I stood by. That makes me guilty enough. Ayanna gripped the rock face. "Then why leave them?" she asked. "Because there was a boy," I said, my eyes fixed on the leather strap. "We found his family burned out on the trail. The others were ready to leave him for the buzzards. I couldn't. I rode him to a ranch near the river and left him there. But I knew if I went back to the gang, I'd end up no different than them. So, I rode off. Been drifting since." Her silence was a difficult, careful consideration. She recognized the cost of walking away from everything when you had nothing but the road ahead. The time for running was long past, and the time for atoning had begun. I had laid bare the deepest wound of my soul. The reason I wore the name Iron Hand, not for strength, but for the cold, unfeeling choices I had once made. My failed attempt at solitude was merely preparation for this moment. The next morning, as I sharpened my knife, a necessary distraction from the cold dread, the local sheriff, Blackwood, rode out to my small camp near Ayanna's wash. He dismounted, dusting off his coat as if my camp were filthy. "Vance," Blackwood said, his voice smooth as oil over sand, "I have a proposition for a man like you, a way to clear the air, to wash the filth of your old name and this savage woman's reputation from my town." I kept my eyes on my work, the knife blade glinting. "Speak plain, Sheriff. Reese and his man are a small problem. The big problem," he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is the Apache band holed up 50 miles north. A group of women and children, they're starving, heading for the reservation. They are off reservation. The general wants them contained." Quietly, he paused, letting the implication hang heavy. "I know Ayanna has kin among them. She's been sneaking food and medicine." I stopped sharpening. The pressure in my chest was immediate and cold. "What are you proposing, Blackwood?" Blackwood smiled, a truly ugly smile. "Your debt to me, that little matter of an old warrant from Arizona territory? Gone. Your name is cleared in this county, a hero, maybe even my deputy. All you have to do, Vance, is track the Apache group, use Ayanna to draw them out, or simply lead a small patrol there and ensure they don't make it to the reservation. It's the law, Vance. You save your own neck, you gain honor, and you get to clean up a true threat. You get everything you came here for, forgiveness and a clean slate." The air tasted like rust. He was offering me a way out, a path to the clean slate and honor I craved, but the price was justice and the ultimate sacrifice of the only person who had ever seen past my past, Ayanna and her people. He was forcing me to betray the very person I was trying to protect under the guise of law and order. "That is no law, Blackwood," I heard myself say. the words low and steady. "That is murder, and you know it. Ayanna will not survive the winter alone, Vance," he countered, his voice suddenly sharp. "You run, you lose her to me. You stay, you fight a war with Reese and this whole town, but you help me. She and her people will be safe on the reservation. You'll be safe. You'll be redeemed." It was a perfect trap. Betray Ayanna's people for her safety, or protect her honor and condemn both of us to war and probable death. The moral dilemma hit me with the force of a bull. Could I choose the greater good, saving Ayanna and my own chance at redemption by committing an undeniable evil against her kin? Or would I choose the hard road of true honor and justice, facing the inevitable, deadly confrontation? My hands were already stained, but this felt like an ultimate choice: to become the villain or to become the man I never was. "I told you I was done with blood, Sheriff," I said, my voice shaking slightly, but my resolve hardening like iron. "And I do not bargain with the lives of the innocent. Get off my property." Blackwood's face went instantly cold, the veneer of law and order dropping away to reveal the predator beneath. "You just chose your grave, Vance, and the woman's too. You should have stayed a lonely drifter." He wheeled his horse and rode back toward Tombstone, leaving the air heavy with the promise of inevitable war. I had chosen honor and justice over easy redemption. The price would be everything, but the conflict was no longer simple self-defense. It was a battle for the soul of the frontier, one I was finally ready to face without running. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. Blackwood's threat, delivered in the shadow of Ayanna's camp, was not the hollow bluster of a self-important sheriff. It was a cold, calculated declaration of war. By choosing honor over the promise of easy redemption, I had effectively signed our death warrants. The problem was no longer 2 vengeful riders. It was the entire crooked machinery of the town, led by a man who wore corruption like a vestment. The consequences were immediate. Within the hour, a posse, led by Blackwood and including the town's local thugs, rode past the camp, kicking up dust and shouting fabricated warrants. They accused me of harboring a fugitive and Ayanna of inciting a raid. Multiple problems converged: Reese's gang, the sheriff's false justice, and the deep-seated prejudice of the town. Ayanna knew her people, the refugees seeking the promised safety of the reservation, were in danger from Blackwood's treachery. Her distress was a tangible thing, a knot of worry that pulled the color from her face. She was no longer just fighting for her life, but for the lives of her hidden family. The weight of her entire tribe's survival was suddenly on her shoulders, and by extension, mine. I moved from defense to preparation, but the air felt thin. I knew Blackwood would not come at us openly. He was too much of a coward for an honest fight. He would use the law, or his twisted version of it, to isolate us, chipping away at my support system until only fear remained. He had me on the run, a wanted man again, and he had Ayanna shackled by her loyalty to her kin. The past consequences of my own failure to act were catching up, demanding a higher price than I had ever anticipated. The next night, the town played its hand. A small fire started in the dry wash, strategically set away from our camp, but close enough to draw our attention. As I rushed to stomp it out, Ayanna, convinced her people were making a signal fire, moved toward the deeper canyon to investigate. It was a perfect trap. When I returned, the fire out, the camp was silent. My heart slammed against my ribs. Her few blankets were scattered. Ayanna was gone. I found a fresh set of boot prints, not Blackwood's, but those of Reese, the tall rider from my past, and his man. The sheriff had outsourced his dirty work. He had ginned up the warrant, and Reese's gang had collected the bounty. Ayanna as leverage against me. The shock was a physical blow, a sense of agonizing failure that eclipsed all my past mistakes. Blackwood had not only framed us, he had pushed me to my breaking point. My deepest fear, my failure to protect, was now a harsh reality. I stood there, the cool night air hitting my sweat-soaked body, and felt the immense, crushing weight of my past choices. Every time I had walked away from a man or woman who needed a hand, every life I had left in the hands of the villains, it had led to this moment. The burden of my old life had finally caught up, and it was holding the one person I had finally allowed myself to care for. I had a choice, the same terrible choice that had haunted me for 20 years, only the stakes were infinitely higher. Run and save my life and my shattered honor, preserving my freedom, but abandoning Ayana to a terrible fate. This was the easier, more familiar path, the path of the coward I swore I would never be again. Or sacrifice everything, ride after them, knowing I was riding into a trap set by Reese's gang and backed by the local sheriff. It meant sacrificing my freedom, my life, and any chance of a peaceful end, but it would fulfill my truest code, justice and the protection of the innocent. My internal conflict peaked. The old voice, the voice of the weary man who just wanted to be left alone, screamed at me to ride, to choose the path of least resistance. The new voice, forged by Ayana's fierce, quiet defiance and my own desperate need for atonement, demanded I stay and fight. I am a man of my word, I thought, gripping my knife so hard the blood ran from my palm. I said I wouldn't run. I won't let them run her down the way I let others be run down. My life, my freedom, they were meaningless currency. My honor wasn't in the badge I wore, but in the woman I loved, and that was a debt I would pay in blood and sacrifice. I had nothing left to lose but the name I was trying to save. I moved with a sudden, terrible clarity. I grabbed my rifle, my gun belt, and a handful of rounds. I wasn't riding to rescue Ayana. I was riding to bring justice to Tombstone, and I was riding to pay my decades-old debt. The action itself was the only growth I had left. I tracked the riders through the cool, silent desert, following the broken scrub and the distinctive horseshoe print of Reese's mount. The trail led me deeper into the jagged, red rock canyons outside of town, the kind of place where a man could disappear forever, and a hanging tree was just an old oak. After a grueling night of riding, my legs screaming with strain, I found their temporary camp in a small box canyon. Reese and his man were there, sitting by a fire, and Ayana was tied to a rocky outcrop. She was clearly hurt, but her eyes, catching the faint light of the rising sun, were defiant, blazing. She was at her lowest, most challenged point, but her spirit was unbroken. This was the final test. I moved slowly, using every trick of the trade I had learned over decades of tracking and fighting. I flanked them, reaching a ledge high above the canyon floor. I had the clear shot. I could kill Reese and his accomplice in their sleep, free Ayana, and disappear. But Blackwood would still be sheriff. The cycle would continue. This wasn't just about Ayana. It was about the system that allowed men like Blackwood to use the law as a noose. I took a deep breath, the desert air cold in my lungs. I was faced with a major choice that changed everything. I would not become a murderer in the night. I would force a public confrontation. I had to expose Blackwood's treachery and Reese's capture of Ayana to the authorities that mattered, even if it cost me my life. I stepped out onto the ledge, kicking a loose rock down into the canyon floor. The sound cracked like a single gunshot. "Reese!" I yelled, my voice echoing off the red rock. "Let the woman go. The game's over." Reese and his man scrambled for their guns. Reese saw me, silhouetted against the morning sky, the rifle aimed, and a look of cold, terrible recognition crossed his face. He knew he was facing the old Iron Hand, the one who never missed. Ayana looked up, saw me, and for the first time, the defiance in her eyes softened, replaced by a desperate, fragile hope. My heart, a dry, cold stone for so long, finally cracked open. The feeling wasn't one of impending victory, but of profound high sin, a willingness to trade my last breath for her freedom and the justice she deserved. I had hit rock bottom, but in that moment of choice, I found my strength, love, and honor. The crisis was far from over, but the choice to fight defined who I had become. My life, lived in the cold shadow of regret, was finally finding a purpose, a true and noble reason to face down certain death. The sun was rising, turning the canyon walls the color of fresh blood, and I knew that, before it set, either Ayana would be free, or my name would be just another forgotten marker on the trail of broken men. "Hey there, Friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. It's easy to forget, but staying hydrated is crucial for your health. Also, if you've been sitting for a while, do a quick lap around the room and give your eyes a break from the screen. Your body will thank you. The moment I stepped out onto the ledge, kicking the rock down to announce my presence, the turn was complete. I wasn't running anymore. I was taking control, my rifle aimed not just at Reese, but at the entire rot that festered beneath Tombstone's veneer of civilization. I had chosen to face my past and fight for my future, embodying the very honor I had spent my life seeking. I said, "Let her go, Reese." I roared, my voice sharp with the clarity of a man who has found his purpose in the face of his own death. Reese, scrambling for cover, sneered up at me. "You're a fool, Vance. We're doing the sheriff's work. This Apache wench is collateral for your old score with us. Come down and talk peace, or we let the town come do the cleanup." He was trying to push me back into the role of the guilty drifter, but that man was dead. "The town won't save you," I countered, my finger light on the trigger. "And Blackwood's law is a lie. I know why he sent you, and I know why you kidnapped Ayanna." I had to accelerate the tempo, to force their hand before Blackwood and his men could arrive. I needed to deliver the earned discovery that would pay off the months of silence and suspicion. I delivered the truth like a bullet. "Ayanna isn't just a random savage, Reese. She's the daughter of Chief Running Bear." The name was notorious, freezing Reese where he stood. Running Bear was betrayed by the U.S. Army 20 years ago in the Rio Verde Treaty. He was promised safe passage, and instead, he was ambushed. Sheriff Blackwood was the corporal who sold out the location of the chief's camp for a promotion and a few gold coins. The major revelation hit them like a mule kick. Ayanna's suffering wasn't about a stolen bridle. It was about systemic betrayal and the continuation of an old, bloody Apache war. Blackwood wasn't just a corrupt lawman. He was an executioner with a decades-long debt of blood. I had connected the final puzzle pieces. The same corruption that cost Ayanna her family was now trying to buy my soul. "You're talking crazy, old man," Reese yelled, trying to regain his footing. "Am I?" I spat. "Blackwood tried to buy my redemption by asking me to track down the last of Running Bear's people, Ayanna's people who are heading for the reservation. He wanted me to become the new instrument of his old crime. I refused. My honor is not for sale to a man who poisons the water with his lies." My words were not for them. They were for Ayanna, a confession and a promise. The character transformation was now visible. The drifter who ran from his past was now the man standing on the rock, willing to die to protect a greater justice. The accomplice, spooked by the depth of the betrayal I revealed, made a mistake. He moved to grab Ayanna, using her as a shield to draw my fire. I took the shot, not at the man, but at the rope binding Ayanna, severing it clean in a single, practiced crack. The man shrieked, momentarily confused by the sudden loss of his human barrier. "Run, Ayanna, run!" I shouted. Ayanna didn't hesitate. Though injured, she used her Apache training, diving into the brush with a speed and silence that spoke of a lifetime of survival in the desert. Now it was a fair fight. Reese, his eyes filled with a cold, professional hatred, aimed his rifle. I dropped to the ground, rolling behind a boulder, the air cracking where his bullet had been. The final confrontation was inevitable. We exchanged fire, the sound echoing endlessly through the red rock. I was older, slower, and wounded from a previous skirmish I hadn't told Ayanna about, but I had the high ground and the burning certainty of a man who was no longer fighting just to live, but to avenge the innocent. My motivations were no longer hidden, they were laid bare. Tin Yu and Kong Li. "This is not for your debt, Reese," I yelled, reloading. "This is for the boy I didn't save. This is for Running Bear. This is for the soul of this land." My heart was beating a heavy, desperate rhythm against my ribs, an emotional peak that felt both terrifying and purifying. The battle was short and brutal. I managed to wound the accomplice, disabling his gun hand. Reese, desperate, tried to escape, scrambling up the opposite canyon wall. I let him go. Killing him here would just be vengeance, not justice. I needed him alive to be a witness against Blackwood. I scrambled down the canyon, my legs screaming from the strain, to find Ayanna. She was huddled under an overhang, clutching the rope I had shot. "You should have left," she whispered, her face streaked with dirt and tears, but her eyes burning with an unshakable strength. "You risked everything." I knelt beside her, checking her wounds. "I promised myself I would stop running," I said simply, the truth of my transformation settling over me. "And I cannot lose you. Not now." In that moment, the stakes clarification was absolute. It wasn't my life that mattered, but the life we could build if justice finally prevailed. "Reese is alive," I told her. "He'll run to Blackwood. We have maybe an hour before they bring the whole town down on us. We have to ride to the next town, Silver City, and find a marshal who is not on Blackwood's payroll. We have the motive, the witness, and the proof. We fight the law with the law." Ayanna nodded, her hand finding mine. It wasn't a lover's touch. It was a pact between two survivors, two wounded souls who had chosen honor over expediency. We stood, two figures silhouetted against the rising sun, readying ourselves for the final, desperate challenge. The future was dark and uncertain, but for the first time in my long, lonely life, I wasn't facing it alone. The time for running was done. The time for facing the fire was upon us. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. The ride out of the Box Canyon was a desperate gamble, a calculated move to draw Blackwood into the open, forcing the final confrontation where true law prevailed. We rode hard for Silver City, a place known for its federal marshal who operated outside of local corruption. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to use the remnants of my old life, my knowledge of the law and the land, to protect the promise of a new one. "He will catch us before we reach the city," Ayanna said, her voice quiet but firm, her eyes scanning the high, sharp ridges. She never complained, but the strain of the captivity and the ride was visible on her proud face. "I know," I replied, the tension in my own voice a low growl. "But he doesn't know I let Reese go. Reese will lead Blackwood here, convinced I'm cornered. We won't fight them in a town. We'll fight them on neutral ground, where the evidence is clear." I had to trust that the marshal's jurisdiction extended far enough, and that Reese's instinct for self-preservation would triumph over his loyalty to Blackwood. We found our ground at the base of a towering, isolated mesa, a perfect natural fortress. Ayanna, using her innate Apache understanding of the terrain, helped me set up a defensive position, her actions speaking volumes more than any words of love could. This was our emotional catharsis, the shared commitment to survive, not just as individuals, but as a unit forged in the heat of conflict. Within the hour, the sound of hoofbeats and the shouting of men echoed in the distance. Blackwood, flanked by Reese, who was nursing a painful wound but clearly desperate to please his boss, and a handful of his crooked deputies, rode into view. He had taken the bait. Blackwood pulled up short, his face a mask of triumphant fury, the sun glinting on his tarnished badge. "Vance, the law has finally caught up to you. You and your savage accomplice are coming back to Tombstone to hang." "You're wrong, Sheriff," I called out, my voice resonating with the finality of a man who has made peace with his ghosts. "I'm not running from the law. I'm running to it. And I've got a witness who says you sold out Chief Running Bear to the Army 20 years ago, and then tried to sell me out to cover your tracks. Justice is coming, Blackwood." Reese, seeing the federal marshal's insignia I had wisely placed on my saddlebag to buy us credibility, and realizing he was trapped, did the only thing a true snake knows how to do. He pointed his rifle at Blackwood. "He's lying, Vance," Reese shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Blackwood promised us a full pardon for the woman. He set the whole thing up." The truth, messy and unexpected, finally spilled into the open. Blackwood was suddenly exposed, his own accomplice betraying him. The final challenge was not a duel, but a public unraveling of his deceit. The system was broken, but the truth, once spoken, was unstoppable. In the ensuing chaos, Blackwood was quickly subdued by his now wavering deputies, whose loyalty evaporated the moment they faced federal charges. Reese, realizing the game was lost, fled into the desert. Justice was served not by my bullet, but by the weight of Blackwood's own corrupt choices. The old ways were finally breaking under the new promise of accountability. The cold satisfaction I felt was the first true peace my soul had known in decades. A few days later, in Silver City, the federal marshal formally took the depositions. Blackwood was arrested. Ayanna's name was clear. Mine, too, was finally clean of the most recent and darkest accusations. We had achieved the impossible. We had fought the frontier's deep-seated hatred and won a measure of justice. Our last night in Silver City, we stood on the porch of the small boarding house, the cool desert wind a balm on our weary faces. The marshal had offered me a job, a chance at the new equilibrium, a true redemption as a lawman. The town, now aware of Blackwood's treachery, was ready to accept Ayanna as the hero who helped expose the corruption. "We can stay here," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the choice. "You'll be safe. I can finally hang up my gun, Ayanna. We can have peace." Ayanna turned to me, her eyes reflecting the vast, dark sky, now filled with the light of a million stars. The scars on her spirit were visible, but the strength I loved was brighter than ever. "And then what, Clay?" she whispered. "We live behind wooden walls, waiting for the next Blackwood, the next rumor. My people are still at the reservation, held on a broken promise. Your soul is free, but your heart still beats with the rhythm of the open road." She reached out and lightly touched the old, scarred leather of my hand, the one they called Iron Hand. "The cowboy love stories they tell are about men who find freedom. We have found love, but we have also earned a great, wide freedom that a small town cannot hold. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments." I looked out at the dark horizon, the line where the earth met the sky, a line that promised endless, terrifying, beautiful space. I thought of the long, lonely roads, the guilt I carried, and the new, profound happiness I had found in protecting this fierce woman. I had finally achieved redemption and a powerful, enduring Wild West love story. But the peace offered by a town felt too small for the magnitude of the life we had saved. I turned back to her. A small, dry smile touched my lips. "Then we don't stay, Ayanna." I walked back inside, packed our meager belongings in the saddles. I led the mare and her horse out into the pre-dawn dark. Ayanna was waiting. She mounted her horse with the grace of a woman ready to face the world. We rode out of Silver City, not as a man and a woman running from a dark past, but as two souls riding toward an unknown, healing future. The open ending was not one of ambiguity, but of limitless possibility, a feeling of absolute release. We paused on a high ridge, the sun just beginning to burn the eastern horizon, a shocking, beautiful red. Ayanna looked at me, her eyes shining with the promise of adventure. "Where to, Iron Hand?" I pulled my hat lower, letting the wind carry the answer across the vast, rolling plains. "Wherever the horizon is widest, Ayanna. Where we can finally put all our ghosts to rest. Maybe north to the Crow, or south to the Mexican border. We ride until we find a place that can hold the truth of who we are." I spurred my mare. Ayanna rode beside me, her silhouette, a perfect match for mine against the morning Sunday. The desert stretched out, immense and challenging, but now it felt like a home, a chance for a fresh, untainted life. The Wild West love we found was not a destination, but the journey itself. The whispers of the past were drowned out by the thunder of our horses' hooves. We rode toward the horizon, two riders, one shared destiny, swallowed by the wide-open country. The wind carried the quiet assurance that their long road of suffering was finally over, leading to a new, vast, Wild West love story. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life.